you ever notice how much we like signs? Signs are really important things. Street signs are necessary because we need to know how to get somewhere. They give us a little sense of direction. But it's just our natural desire. We want signs. We like to use landmarks to give us directions. If we can't have a sign, we'll use a landmark. And you know the stereotypical story, if you're out in the rural areas, it's like you just drive down the road so you get to the big oak tree and you turn right. We like signs. Now, when I first met Leah Beth, I was in the stage of trying to get her attention. And in that process, she grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I don't know if you know this. I grew up in Belleville, Illinois. There's already a 420-mile span of space between me and her. And so in the process of trying to get her attention, I had this perfect day planned. Now, she didn't quite know it was a perfect day. She just thought, I'm just taking her to do some sightseeing in this town called Hot Springs, Arkansas, where my grandparents had retired and lived for years, but they had already passed away by that time. And so I had this whole plan worked out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick her up at her house, and then I'm going to take her over to Hot Springs. We're going to do a little sightseeing, and there's this awesome park that's outside of Hot Springs where my grandparents used to take us to go swimming. It is so neat, and I packed up a whole picnic. I'm like, this is going to be great. I'm going to take her for a picnic at the park. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to get her attention, and life's just going to go on. And so I get all that planned. Now, unbeknownst to her, she's just thinking, this weird Yankee is going to take me, and I'm going to take him sightseeing and take him around Hot Springs. And so it's that whole early stage, trying to get attention. You know what it's like? You can think about that. If your spouse was good or bad at it, who knows? I had my moments, but I get the whole day planned out, and so she gives me direction from my friend Ty's house, who I was staying, to get to where her parents lived. And so she gives me the whole directions over the phone, and this is 25, 26 years ago. I had no cell phone. And even if I did have a cell phone, it doesn't have all the great features we do now where our phones do everything. And we love the everything in our phones because there's GPS. It gets us where we need to go. There's even GPS in stores. And I love it because I go to Lowe's or Home Depot. I don't go wandering too often because if I do, I buy way too much more than I need. But it's awesome because it's like aisle 12, bay 18. And it's almost like at one time it's just going to drag you right to where you need to go and take you. And sometimes I wish it would at other stores. Menards, get your game going. But I love the technology. Back then, did not have that technology. So she gives me the list, and she gives me the directions. She's like, turn on Route 5, go down until you get to Spring Hill or Springdale, I don't remember, and you turn left on it, and then turn right on Hilltop. Now, she was saying Hilltop Road. I heard her say turn right on Hilltop. Now, signs are important. So I'm driving down Spring Hill. Driving like, I got to get there. I'm driving, and I'm looking for a hilltop to turn right on. Not a hilltop road, but a hilltop. And so I'm driving down the road, and there is no hilltop with a right turn lane on it. I drive all the way down Springdale. I turn and drive all the way back up. I turn and drive all the way down. I'm looking at every road to the right, and there is no hilltop. There's also no Hilltop Road because 911 was in the process of replacing all the signs and had taken down the sign. Now, we want signs, don't we? We want signs. I was 2 hours late. Why she stuck around? She wonders to this day. Because I was 2 hours late, looking for a hilltop to turn right on. Not knowing there's not a hilltop road. Now, the funniest, craziest thing, when you drive that way, Hilltop Road is not on a hilltop. Hilltop Road is actually in a valley to turn right on, while I'm looking for a hilltop. We like to have signs. We desire, naturally, especially if you've been walking with God, we want a word from God. God, give me a word. Give me a sign. I want some kind of physical manifestation. I want something tangible I can hold on to in the crazy. I want something firm to be on in the shaky. So we're like, give me a sign. Do I stop? Do I go? Do I yield? Do I turn right? Do I go left? Do I do something? And sometimes we look for the craziest things. We're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to go. But he was wearing a red shirt. That's my favorite color. So therefore, it must be God telling me to do that. You notice that sometimes. We want a sign. I mean, if you think about Gideon was that way. He was like, okay, God, you give me a sign. If you want me to do this, I'm going to throw some cloth outside. When the dew comes, keep my cloth dry. And then that happens. And he's like, okay, God, that was a great sign. Give me another one. Why? I want something tangible to hold on to. So I'm going to throw the cloth down. This time, make everything else dry and the cloth wet, or however it goes. We want a sign. Now, the reality is faith in God needs to really be our sign. And that requires trust. The writer of Hebrews says this, Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The contemporary English version puts it this way. Faith makes us sure of what we hope for and gives us proof of what we cannot see. The writer continues in verse 6, and without faith it is what? Impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists, and He rewards those who seek Him. Now, when we look at Luke chapter 2, there's this crazy group of guys called shepherds. And they're out shepherding. They're out taking care of sheep. And in their day, shepherds were stinky people. They were farmers. They were working the fields with their animals. They're like, we have to keep them safe from wolves and thieves. So it's at a mild time of the year, so they're out at night with their flock, keeping them safe. And an angel shows up. They're in a remote place on an ordinary day, and suddenly everything changes when an angel pops into the situation. Luke chapter 2, verse 8. That night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them. Can you imagine this? It's suddenly. It's unexpected. It's something big happens, because big things can happen in unexpected moments, in unexpected places, with unexpected people. Did you get that? Big things can happen at unexpected moments, in unexpected places, with unexpected people. Shepherds in that time were kind of looked down on, because one reason is shepherds were dirty. Because if you've ever been around animals, you get dirty. For years, Danny Jokic had horses, and my son Nolan loved to be in the horse cart things that Danny did with the horses. But you would have to get around the horses to get them ready for the competitions. And the horses have been out working as they've doing the competitions, so they're hot and sweaty, but then you have to hug them while you're hooking all the straps and everything onto them. Then horses go potty, but they don't have horse bathrooms anywhere for them to go. They just go where they are. And so then you're cleaning it up. It's just gross and smelly. And then at the end of the day, when you're putting them all away, it's icky. So shepherds were around them, and so they're just icky from being around sheep, because sheep are animals, and they don't care. They just want to be dirty and messy and do whatever sheep do while they're frolicking in the fields. So the shepherds are around them. So then to the religious people and to their culture, they were viewed as unclean. They could not be ceremonially clean according to the law, because they were around stinky, dirty animals all the time. So they were kind of pushed to the outskirts of society because they couldn't follow the law completely. They just weren't the greatest crowd to be around. And then on top of that, they had this stereotypical attitude about shepherds, and they were viewed as being just dishonest people. And I'm sure it could come because of sheep. They get that big coat on them, and they could be like, oh yeah, he's really big and fat, and he's not. Or they're lying about how clean they are. Probably some of them were a little devious and cleaned up the coats on them to make them look like they were spotless when they weren't. Whatever. So shepherds were not viewed as the most reputable crowd of individuals. And so you have this kind of group of people that the angels show up onto. It's an unexpected group of people that God speaks to and uses. So there's the angel, shows up. And these are probably some devout shepherds. They're probably not the stereotypical messy ones. They're probably some devout individuals that are hungry for God. See, the reality of the matter is I am useful. It is my heart condition that matters, not my history, my age, my status that influences if God will speak to me or use me. It's my heart. Do I have a heart for Him, or do I have a heart against Him? And here it is, I really have a feeling these shepherds just had hearts for God. Now, I do find it really interesting that shepherds as a profession were viewed of low social status when you had some very famous individuals in Israel's history that were shepherds. I mean, Abraham and Moses had spent time as shepherds, and they're their two biggest heroes. David was a shepherd boy before he became a king. But it's funny how sometimes we'll look down on people that God doesn't. So here it is, the angels show up. They represent the outcasts and the sinners that Jesus came to save. The very people that were looked down on, Jesus is right there in their midst, being like, I want to save them. I want to accept them. I want to pull them in and use them. Because why? Luke 19:10 puts it this way, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And if I could just expound upon that, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost, the broken, the forgotten, the neglected, the insecure, the unwanted, the misfit. Jesus came to save. Jesus came to an unexpected place, to an unexpected people, and He changed them. Just like us. We weren't expecting it, but Jesus changed us. Continuing on, verse 9, chapter 2. They were terrified, but the angel reassured them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David, and you will recognize Him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of clothes, lying in a manger. Now they're terrified, because why? The supernatural is not natural. The unknown is not known to us. So it's natural that you're going to be like, whoa, this is weird. This is making me uncomfortable. This is just not quite right. Because it's just out of the ordinary. It's not like you're sitting there one day and an angel just appears, is it? That's supernatural. It's not in the ordinary that you're sitting there and an angel appears and then a whole choir of angels appear around you. They're terrified. I would be too. And it's funny because they're not looking for a sign. Now in 2002, my wife and I took a vacation to New York City. And we went there to do some sightseeing. It was our anniversary time. We'd been married for 5 years at that time. So we go there for our anniversary and we're sightseeing. And our friend Deborah Lee Daco, if you remember the Dacos, she was graduating from a art school there, acting school. And so we went to her graduation, which was awesome to do that. But we're there in New York City. And when you walk in Manhattan, they have signs. Lots of signs. Everywhere you look is a sign. Gigantic signs, little signs, moving signs. It is super bright. It's a unique experience to see all of that. For these guys, they're not looking for a sign. The angels show up, they give them this information, but they're not looking for a sign because they already had knowledge of a bunch of signs already. They didn't need more signs. I mean, think about this. There's a lot going on just in the layers of complexity that are going on in this story. Jesus shows up. The angels show up to shepherds that are in Bethlehem. Bethlehem's kind of a unique city because it's the birthplace of King David. It's also the place that would be the birthplace of the Messiah. It's also close enough to Jerusalem that a lot of the sheep that were raised there were probably used in the sacrificial system in Jerusalem. So there's stuff going on just in their location. Then you have the prophecies that are taking place. I mean, at the very beginning, God began to talk about the coming of the Messiah. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 5, you have what's called the proto-evangelium. And it talks about, it begins to lay out the reality that soon there will be a Messiah. God at the very beginning with Adam and Eve is already planning on Jesus at the fall. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, you have God talking to Abraham, and he says this, "And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Why? Because the Messiah will come through one of Abraham's descendants, through Israel, the nation. In Isaiah 9:6, "For us to a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Isaiah 7:14, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us." Micah 5:2, "But you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, you are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler of Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient of days." So here you have a lot going on there. There's a lot of layers of complexity, and they're kind of aware of that. They would have had an understanding of their Jewish law to know, hey, something's unique is going to happen in Bethlehem. And so they're already anticipating the arrival of the Messiah, the anointed one. And so then the angels give them a sign. They're not looking for a sign, but he gives them one. Okay, there's going to be a baby wrapped in a feeding trough. So go and find the baby wrapped in a feeding trough. Now, they don't ask for a sign, they're given one. Now, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm there and an angel shows up to tell me something, right there's one sign. I don't need to ask for another one. Angel. Whoa. Now, I don't know what angels look like. My wife might be one. I'm really blessed that way. I don't know what they look like, but an angel shows up. That's one. Okay, one sign. Angel shows up and tells me a bunch of stuff that reflects on everything that I know from the prophecies about the Messiah. That's really going to get my attention. Then a multitude of angels break out in a choir. I'm thinking, wow, that doesn't happen very often. Now, sometimes when we're laying here and we're bored and we fall and hit our head or whatever, that might make something weird happen. But a choir happening, and then they're like, and this will be a sign for you. What? Dude, you be here as a sign. Go find a baby in a feeding trough. And I'm thinking as they go, well, that happens every day. How am I going to find a baby in a feeding trough? I mean, every day there's a baby in a feeding trough. How many of you all were ever put in a feeding trough when you were a kid? Now, I know how my grandma grew up. I don't quite know what they would have done based on where my grandma grew up in very deep, poor southern Illinois. However, I doubt they put my grandma in a feeding trough. So can you imagine what it's like as they're walking around thinking, I wonder where we find a baby in a feeding trough? And sometimes if we're not careful, we use our imagination with what the context that we know. So for us, we're thinking, oh my goodness, could you imagine finding a newborn baby in a feeding trough in southern Illinois? Because we're thinking big areas. We're thinking big communities. But the reality is Bethlehem was small. So finding where a baby had been born was probably not as difficult as we would think of it today. But there they go, and they go looking for the baby. Because they just faithfully follow the sign to the source of the sign. Verse 15 goes on. When the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, boy, that was really weird. We should sit back and think about this for a while. Maybe blog about it, put it on Facebook. This is going to blow up on Instagram because we can send pictures of the angels that showed up. Let's just see what people's comments are on our Facebook page. We're going to be one of those YouTube millionaires and live in a YouTube mansion now as everybody's like, we're like, catch the angels, they're singing, this is awesome. Because that's our temptation. We're like, oh, let me just think about this. You know what I need to do? I need to pray. I'm just going to stop and I'm just going to pray about this and contemplate what I've experienced. Maybe have a friend come over, we'll have some coffee, we'll contemplate this. You realize that's not their response. When the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, let's go to Bethlehem. Let's see the thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. They hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph. And there was the baby lying in a manger, a feeding trough. The shepherds, they are full of anticipation, they're full of hope, but they're full of one other thing, obedience. And they didn't obey slowly, they obeyed quickly. I can just see this. Angels show up, conversation, choir, awesome. Angels leave. Silence. Bah in the background. I know we're supposed to be here watching stinky sheep. God told us the Messiah is here. Let's go check it out. And I don't think they're just like, it's cool. Just walking into town, taking their time. I'd imagine they were on full-on sprints. Running with everything in them to check it out. And I'd imagine they show up at Mary and Joseph's place. They're like, hold on. Let me get some breath. Hold on. And it probably took 4 or 5 minutes for them going, you know how it is. Catching their breath. They're trying to figure out what's going on. But they had this deep faith in them that just had this response. God said it, let's go check it out. It was spontaneous obedience. Spontaneous. There's a Greek word that is used there about hurried. It was S-P-E-U-D-O, speedo. It means sudden, haste, quick, really fast. It was everything in them to get there. Fast. They're obeying quickly. Here's the reality. Delayed obedience is really just disobedience in disguise. But they're like, we have to go check this out. We really need to learn to move quickly on what God shows us. Be it Holy Spirit whispering something to us, or be it God's Word revealing something to us, but we need to move quickly when God shows us. The great thing that happens next, though, is the source revealed the sign. We can trust the source. God gave them the sign. The person that gave them the sign can be trusted. God gave them the sign of the baby in the manger. Now, when I got to Leobeth, we talked over the directions. She did tell me Hilltop Road. But I was ignoring the road and just looking for the hilltop. But the reality is, if I would have just trusted the source of the sign, I would have turned on Hilltop Road, had they had a sign there. But we can trust God. The sign helped them recognize the child because it helped them to realize the truthfulness of the message. Because sometimes we need revelation for proclamation. Hear that? We need revelation for proclamation. God reveals something to us, so then we start talking about it. God shows us something, so we proclaim it. See, that's why it's really good for us to be in the habit of telling our story. This is my story. This is how I met Jesus. This is what He's done in my life. This is what I've seen Him do. This is how I've seen Him work. This is how I've seen Him work in others' lives. Yeah, I've seen Him do miracles. It might not be in my life, but I've seen Him do something in their life. I don't understand why He's not doing something in my life, but I know that He does work. And so I'm telling my story because I've had revelation of who God is, so I'm proclaiming who He is. I've had my revelation for my proclamation. It's good stuff. Get it in your head. I need to praise my Savior. I need to have proclamation with praise. I love this part, verse 17. After seeing Him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. Told everyone. Can you imagine what that was like? I got to tell you what I saw. I got to tell you what I've experienced. Hey, come here. I got to tell you this. Hey, go get the neighbors. Have them come over here. I mean, babies already draw crowds. All you got to do is bring a baby in to the room. Even the most hard-hearted of you in the room will be like, oh, let me pat his head. I mean, the most annoying thing for a pregnant woman is when people want to pet the baby before it's even out. And they're like, let me pet your belly. So imagine they're telling everyone, this is what we've seen, this is what we've heard. All who heard the shepherd's story were astonished. But Mary kept all these things in her heart and thought about them. Awesome. Jesus' arrival is a glorious moment to celebrate. When it says astonished, it's a Greek word I'm not even going to attempt to spell for you or even pronounce because it's about 13 letters long, but it's something along the lines of ekthumazah. And it means to be very amazed, in a state of wonder. Whoa. Wow. In awe. There's few things in my life where I've ever experienced where it's just like, whoa. One of those is a place in Hawaii called Bellows Beach. And it's you drive through this winding road through the trees, and then you make a right turn, and then all of a sudden through the trees you see the most beautiful beach in Hawaii. And you're just like, every time we went there when our friends were stationed in Hawaii and we went to visit them, it's like every time we take that turn, you're just like, whoa. Or one time years ago, Leah Beth and I, when Nolan was 6 months old, the best trip ever, not when you have an infant, we went to the Grand Canyon. And we're standing at the Grand Canyon, and you're like, whoa. And it just had everybody in awe that was standing there. And I'll never forget this little kid that's probably 10 years old looking over to somebody next to him. And he just goes, who made this? Because he was in such awe. And here it is. These individuals, they hear what God is doing, and they just stand there in awe. Wow. Be amazed in awe of who God is and how God works. Tell of what you've seen and heard. The reality is the more I'm around Jesus, the more I'm going to talk about him. Because I just can't help it. Because the more I'm around Jesus, then the more I'm just going to be in utter awe of who he is and how he works. I love this, verse 20. The shepherds went back to their flocks. They didn't go back with the attitude of, wow, that was a cool experience. I have to make sure we write that one down in the journals and scrapbooks. That was pretty cool, going back to life as usual. I love how they go back. Because they go back glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen. It was just as the angel had told them. Here's the reality. God keeps his promises. He is true to his word. If God says it, it will happen. If he promises it, you can count on it. And the reality is, Jesus is our Emmanuel, God with us. So if there's anything that we're going through, we can hold on to him knowing he is God with us. Life might not be perfect, but he's God with us. At the end of Matthew, as Jesus is giving out his challenge, his focus, his mission statement, his commission to his people, go into all the world and preach the gospel, make disciples. He does all that, but he wraps it up with, and I will be with you always. Why? Because he's Emmanuel, God with us. So no matter what I am facing, he's with us. No matter what I'm going through, he's with me. No matter what I'm facing, I can trust him. Even if the promises aren't happening the way I want them to, even if everything's not going the way I thought it would, he is God and he is with me and he's true to his word and I can count on him. I can trust him. I can rely upon him. So no matter what you're facing today, don't give up. Trust him. No matter what you're facing, don't let go. Keep holding on to him. Get close to him. Seek his face. Be in awe of who he is. Yeah, my prayer wasn't answered. He's still God. Things aren't going the way I want him to. He's still in complete control. But God, I want this. No, God, I want you. So I'm going to seek you. I'm going to be in awe of you. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to worship you. I'm going to seek your face.